John Zaika, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
John, you're the creator of Kite on a String, the Bobby Kimball Story, a film about Bobby Kimball, who was the voice of Toto. Certainly all those big hits in the 80s were Bobby Kimball's voice. Why was it important for you to make this documentary?
Well, I have to kind of go back to tell that story. Do you want the real quick, or?
No, well, we've got time if you've got time.
So about late 2013, Bobby had been asking me to do another record, and that record was We're Not in Kansas Anymore. That's what it ended up being. And I noticed when I left North Carolina and started recording in Dallas and finally got to Bobby in California that there was something going on, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. There was the hearing issue, and he was singing a lot from the back of his throat, kind of like an opera singer back here, like an operatic, instead of the normal Bobby Kimball, because I had done another earlier record with him in '96. So I noticed some anger issues, and there was something just not right. Anyway, we finished that record, and it was in the Grammy voting. But every year or month after month, things just started to progress. He had this wild performance in Japan that caused our record release party to be canceled. And then finally he was, I took him to the Sherman Oaks Hearing Institute, and they diagnosed that he lost everything from 400 hertz up. So he couldn't hear cymbals, pitch, key centers, guitars. All he heard was, like this. So it was hard for him to stay in pitch. And then finally his wife, Jasmine, Bobby came home and told her that he has a problem with his memory. He had gotten lost a couple times in LA. And then he was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, the same thing that Bruce Willis has. A little different that Bobby developed memory behavioral problems first, and now towards the end stages he's got language issues. So I was there in Los Angeles, and I was transferring our earlier masters from 1996 from a record called All I Ever Needed that was only released in Europe. And I was there recording with Mickey Thomas and Bill Champlin, a cover of the song Work to Do by the Isley Brothers, with a bunch of great jazz musicians. And I would go by and see Bobby because he was only about 3 miles from where I was staying. And it was heartbreaking watching him because he was so well studied and deep, like telling you books to read and movies to watch. It was heartbreaking for me. And so when I got back to Dallas with the drives from our analog masters, I was in my studio, and my mom had just died a few months before that. And Bobby was calling there saying weird stuff. And she told me her last wishes were to continue to love and be loved, never plagiarize, and look after your friend. And Bobby had called while I loaded all the tracks in Pro Tools. Right at that moment, I was listening to it going, my God, he's in his prime here. This is so good. What am I going to do with this? Because nobody gives a crap about streaming, It's just not the same as it was. And I know, Greg, back in the heyday of, records and the early CDs and before MP3 came along, but I'm not complaining about that. But so I was just dumbfounded. What am I going to do with this? And thinking about my friend Bobby and all that he's going through. And he called me right at that moment. And there was no rhyme or reason. It was just, he said to me, John, will you help me, in his now voice, which is kind of robotic. And I said, Bobby, I'll always help you. And I hung up the phone. I had a tear streaming down my face. And right at that moment, I said, I have to do some kind of documentary here. I have to document his career. He's had 62 years in the music business. At the end of his Toto run, and for a few years there, things got kind of out of balance a little bit. So there's reconciliation, there's respect and all of that. And I knew I needed to do this. So the next morning I had gotten up, and oddly enough, I took the trash out from my studio, and there was ice in Dallas, and I slipped and cracked my head and got a concussion. But I still got out of the hospital that day after they checked me out, and I took off for Louisiana. That was 18 months ago, and started filming and haven't looked back. And I just need to do this and bring recognition to what he was able to achieve through starting at 8 years old. That's why I'm in Louisiana right now. I'm cleaning up, doing wrap-ups of the early life, because the first third is Louisiana. Then he goes to SS Fools. Then SS Fools they're signed to CBS. That lasts for 18 months. And then he gets together with these guys, Rock Doctor, and then he cuts a demo at Davlin Studios, which becomes a thing that nobody ever heard about until I'm doing this documentary. Every record company wanted to sign Bobby Kimball right before Toto. Walter Yetnikoff, Mo Austin, Richie Podler, all these guys were wanting to sign Bobby to a deal. So he chose, when the guys from Toto that became Toto came back from the Boss Gags tour, he chose to join them. So there's just so much rich history here. And I was born in '64. I love the Beatles, but I've gone through and cataloged probably over 250 cassette tapes of take-homes, demos, roughs, live events, rehearsals of Toto, Bobby's earlier stuff, and the appreciation for me of all that is Toto, and how slick they were and how tight they were, and what great songwriting and musicianship. I mean, it truly was a brain. Even though there were 6 of them, it thought as one, and they were just solid. So it was kind of like my Beatles moment when I'm going through this now and going, wow, these guys were just, yeah. You look at this band, Greg, and it's like every member. You see a lot of super bands like, the Rolling Stones or Zeppelin, where a Jimmy Page or a Robert Plant or Mick Jagger or Keith Richards. But in Toto, every member was on multi-platinum records all over the place.
Yeah.
It wasn't just centered to that band. So there was a lot of reasons to do this. He's not getting any better. He's at the end stages of it. You don't know when it's going to happen that he leaves us. He can look, full and healthy, but the way that this disease works is the brain just stops communicating, or they aspirate. The brain stops communicating with the vital organs. So I wanted to do this, and I had a brief communication with Steve Lukather, my accountant, who's also Steve Lukather's dear friend. And he had some guidelines for me. And he said, don't make this a YouTube thing. So I didn't seek out investors. I took my own money and just started going at it like a kind of Pac-Man and gathering all the information. And Bill Champlin was my first interview, because Bill and Bobby and Michael McDonald and Tom Kelly did a lot of backgrounds together in the early days. And from Bill, I went to Steve Porcaro next, Simon, Lenny. Then I came back and got Lukather. And then I got David Page. And all of these guys have just been over the top nice. A text exchange I had with one of their main members a couple weeks ago, or a month ago or whatever, when the trailer came out. He was crying in his hotel room, and he said, my God, he goes, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize. And I said to the person, I said, all I want was for you guys to make you guys happy, and Bobby to have the ending he deserves. And across the board, all of them have sent me beautiful messages. We're in constant contact. So it's been,
Yeah.
It started like this, and now it's like this.
You mentioned Steve Lukather. I've interviewed Steve numerous times.
Right.
Read his audio sorry, read his book. He talks about some difficult times with Bobby. Do you address...
And me.
Yeah.
And me. When he says Kimball's producer comes up to him at NAMM, that's me.
Yeah.
I'd had enough, because I was never involved in some exterior band members that Bobby was doing smaller gigs with that were talking derogatory things. So I'd had enough when we were at NAMM, and I walked over to Lukather and took Bobby with me, and I said, Bobby meet Steve, Steve meet Bobby, and they hugged.
Yeah.
And I kind of forced the issue, but we have since talked about all that. Everybody's fine now. Yeah. Difficult times. Every band goes through it, but right now it's all love.
Yeah. Well, the last time I spoke to Luke, he said that he loved Bobby and all that stuff's under the bridge. And he lamented that when he did speak to Bobby, he'd get 5 minutes out of him and then the dementia would kick in. But they seem to have made peace with each other now.
We're going to get together. I'm leaving after I leave Louisiana, which will be Friday night or Saturday morning. I drive back to Dallas, then I go to Los Angeles, and then Steve is going to get together with Bobby one last time and give him some love, and we're all going to go eat somewhere. You have to kind of be careful because it's kind of reminds you of maybe sometimes Tourette's, and it's almost like you're with a 5-year-old because there's no filter. But all he does is he looks you in the eyes and says, "I love you." You know, it's all about love for him. That's why the end of the trailer, oddly enough, the one sector remaining is love. That's what the dialogue I do in the trailer. So, you know, I wasn't a filmmaker. I've been a music producer, been in the music business most of my life. So this was new to me, and maybe there's some positive and negatives out of that, meaning that I'm going with my heart and my instinct. So I don't have rules, so to speak, you know? Yeah. So,
are you a fan of music documentaries in general? Do you like to watch them?
Of course I am. I loved Muscle Shoals, Sound City, I've so many documentaries I've watched, but I'm also a fan of Scorsese and Tarantino. So I have a little of that in me. So you guys will be shocked when you see the final, because there's some stuff that, you know, most people are thinking that I'm going to go through all the drug use and all that. I'm not. Mine, because there's a part of this towards the end. I've been sober for 18 years. And when Bobby and I finished that first record, a manager of his had stolen the record and signed it to 2 labels. And I became totally angered with the music business and vowed nothing to do with it. And I just dove into addiction. And I was in San Francisco, and they saved my life. My heart stopped twice. I was in the hospital for 3 months. I was 130 pounds. And it took me 9 years to reclaim my life. The whole time, Bobby had left Toto, got with Yoso, was still calling me, wanting me to do another record. So it's like in this film, I go back and get healthy to come back, and now Bobby's becoming ill, and I'm trying to help him out of the end of his life.
Yeah. So where's the film at now? Are you still requiring funding?
No. Really the Kickstarter situation was to help with the music licensing, because the retail cost when I was dealing with Sony, I licensed Rosanna and Hold the Line for the trailer. When I started putting together the list of 18 songs I have that I want, my wish list, they told me retail is around $150,000. So at that point, I started doing the numbers and realized through another filmmaker that we become kind of friends. We've talked on the phone. He did The Wrecking Crew, Denny Tedesco, and The Immediate Family. He said, do yourself a favor. He said, I did 3 Kickstarters on The Immediate Family. It's there for a reason. There's a film division. So I just needed some help with the music licensing. And I thought it was another way to maybe give some people some rewards and stuff. But I have a pretty clear path right now to finish and have my main rough cut by the end of October. There's 2 distributors I'm talking to right now, although I'm not making a decision yet because we're in an interesting time with the strike. They need content. So in one of the companies I don't want to give names out, one of the companies that is pretty famous and owned by a gazillionaire, they want me to finish editing first. So I would like to get at least my rough cut done and do like a focus group and make sure I'm where I'm at. and then I'll open it up to the distributors. I haven't chose one yet, but they're there for the taking right now. It's just I want to be further along to make sure that we get the best deal possible, because I need this. It's the end of Bobby's life. I need it to have all the, you know, hoorah it deserves, if you will.
It sounds like a big part of this film are the walks that you have with Bobby, just you and him talking.
No, that just became, there's more than that, way more than that. But why I did the extended trailer was, you know, people know me from music, or the people that I know in the music business, everybody knows me from music. So at first I put a couple teasers out there just to let people know I'm serious, I'm doing this. And then I started getting a lot of emails while I was still filming. Well, we haven't seen Bobby, we haven't seen this, where are the Toto songs, where's the... So I sat with my editor and I said, geez, how about if we do an extended trailer? That way we're ready for film festivals at the same time. So that's why I did that. But the walk scene was just, you know, us in Malibu. There are a lot of times with us together that's filmed, but sometimes, like, he likes you to, and it's not in any kind of sexual way, he likes you to lay next to him in his bed and he watches YouTube and he tells me old stories. So I started getting it's been a running joke during this film. I take my gimbal and we call it my Bobby gimbal. and he's there and I'm here and we lay next to each other and he tells me stories and I talk to him. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of him trying to play on the piano. I did interview him when I started, basically. So that would have been about 17 months ago. I've been out there 5 times. I'm going out there again. I'll be out there the whole month. He's being inducted into that California Music Hall of Fame. We're filming that. So I will continue. I have a ton of footage. No worries about that. But I wanted to be, this time I'm bringing a headset camera that's kind of hidden back here, because sometimes you're like, he's saying some great stuff and you're trying to get you know, and he's already done and moved on. Because with this disease, he does some things that are like almost like rapid cycling, whistling, breathing, or he'll make noises like yeah. It's interesting. It's kind of like Rain Man a little bit, and then a child at the same time. So it's, you know, yeah, there's a lot of footage of Bobby. There's a ton of footage.
You've been friends for a long time. What have you learned about Bobby that you didn't know making this documentary?
I don't know whether well, I'll say this. I didn't know about the demo because that was concealed. I don't know why it was. I don't know why he never blew that with a bullhorn, because that's interesting. Walter Yetnikoff, Mo Austin, all these record companies wanted him, and he chose to go with the guys that became Toto. The other thing is the interview I have on Friday. Well, yeah, it's going to be Friday or Saturday morning in Benton, his hometown. Bobby was in a band. You can see it on the internet. If you type Bobby Kimball Rebels, it's like a 50s picture, and it says Rebels on the bass drum. He's 8 years old. He's already singing then. I'm interviewing the guitar player that was older than him that still has it all together and has it all documented in photos and everything. And I'm going to sit down with him and interview him, because what the interesting thing that I didn't know is that Floyd and Ruby Kimball, his parents, signed paperwork. So by 12 years old, he was going and getting on a bus in Benton and going to Orange, Texas, to Lake Charles, to Beaumont at 12 years old, and playing in the big boy clubs with the older guys, you know. And the other thing, I always knew he was a good keyboard player, but like in the 70s, he was hired into a band called Machine. They were playing in New Orleans at the Ivanhoe. Led Zeppelin comes in there. Black Sabbath comes in there. They sit in with them. Bobby was just the B3 player. He'd only sing like one song in the night. but you know, his younger days, he was like a Cajun Donny Osmond, you know, that high voice. And then all of a sudden he gets into keyboards. And then I interviewed Sonny Landreth, the famous guitar player. I interviewed him in this hotel, as a matter of fact, last time I was here. And he talks about when they were on stage and they were doing this thing where the girls dance and they do shots. Him and Bobby they'd be playing hey sister go, you know, it would be like 20 minutes long, and him and Bobby would be practicing scales. He said Bobby was more as a musician then, and then it would just like he would go off into his vocals in the next band, and then he would concentrate on keyboards. But then when he got the call to come out and join SS Fools from John Smith, the saxophone player from Edgar Winter's White Trash, who ends up on Toto 4 and does the Make Believe sax, he got that call. That was it. It was all vocals from then on out. And, you know, Bobby would always play a keyboard on stage here and there. Or when he broke his foot with Toto 4 tour, they put him behind a keyboard the rest of the tour. I don't know if you've seen any of that footage. But there's that. There's a lot of little nuggets, but I almost think I'm getting dementia sometimes because I constantly got to go back. I have about 38 hours now of footage. So right now we're editing the front third. The editor's working back in Dallas right now. And I said, I need to come down here and get these last little things and some drone footage of Bobby's town and get that to him. And then I need to go on to Los Angeles so we can finish up that first third. We're doing it in thirds. We do Louisiana's the first third, Los Angeles the second third, part of Los Angeles, San Francisco the last, and what we did in the end, because I have to tie that who's John Zaika with Bobby Kimball. And it's a human story along with all this pop music culture. If it makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
So have you got a limit? 2 hours, 3 hours?
2 hours. 2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah.
But I'm one of these guys that I've always been that way in music too. When I'm producing, I'll always take more and then edit down, you know. I don't know if it's a fault of mine, but I always, like, I'll see a folder that, you know, I have all these folders that are Benton, Louisiana, or Lafayette, or New Orleans, or Biloxi, and I'll skim through it, and then I'll find something else that's a little better from another folder, and I'll move that into, you know, it's kind of like playing chess, moving these parts around. So
what do you hope this film achieves?
I hope, well, there's a few things. I want to bring recognition to frontotemporal dementia because there is no cure, and it is rare. And right now they just treat it with basic mental illness meds like Seroquel, you know, some other, I can't think of the other one, Cerazone or Paxil, Zoloft, stuff like that. They treat it with mood stabilizers. So they don't know much about it. There's studies on the way. So I hope to bring recognition to that. I hope to bring recognition to his career, because there's a part in this film with that Africa performance in Japan that young guy decided to have his Cinderella moment and make a YouTube video of it where Bobby's drastically out of, and these people are just unloading on Bobby. I know he's a public figure, but enough's enough. I mean, they're calling him a drug addict. Is he retarded? He's got brain cancer. Why did Toto ever? And he started trying to reply to them. And that was kind of the last thing. So there's online hatred. You know, I don't know if anybody's going to ever learn from it, but there comes a time when you just need to point it out. There's already been 3 people, while we're on that subject, that have, one guy commented on the YouTube, the extended trailer. 2 other people sent messages to my webmail saying they're sorry, admitting that they were part of the problem. In this juggernaut of Toto, see if this makes sense to you. You can get the attention of somebody famous, let's say in that band, by bringing anger, like, you know, did you hear that this other band member said this and this and this. And finally the guy wakes up and responds. And then the person telling him that, who's a fan or a super fan, feels like they're friends with him then. So that perpetuates and perpetuates. And next thing you know, it's out of control. At the end of the day, this is all love and a special thing that these guys all built together. So I hope to bring recognition to that catalog, to Bobby's career of 62 years, which is kind of, you don't hear of that often. There are some long careers, but, you know, and maybe he shouldn't have been doing the last 8 years, but he didn't know any better. You know, it was already coming into play. And also somehow for the young musicians and artists and people wanting to dive into this business, how much actually goes into it and how much of yourself you have to give. You know, I know, you know, Greg, a real performance, whether it's a vocalist, a guitar player, you can tell when it's contrived or when it's real, when a singer believes the story he's telling. You know, I was listening to Supertramp last night when I was driving from Dallas, Breakfast in America, and it just reminded me, wow, you know, this guy sings like an elf, but it's so good that it's so believable what he's singing about. You know what I mean? Believable story. So I just want to point out some of the work that goes in there, because there's 3 hours of footage. I can't use all of it, obviously, of when we tracked that first record at Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco with Buzzy Feet and Joel Taylor, Mitchell Foreman, Brian Bromberg, Mickey Thomas, the horn section. I had Tom Dowd sitting in on sessions with me. He was working with Greg Allman upstairs, but Greg Allman wasn't showing up. So he was coming down, hanging with me. And I have all that. So there's all this great footage, and it's life lessons and human story, all, you know, kind of balled in one.
Yeah.
Is it confusing, or do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I just find it all amazing that you have to condense all this into 2 hours. But I suppose there's the option of extras or outtakes and little extensions.
Well, yeah,
on the way.
there's some interesting things in the end. You know, I know in the end, people are going to be sitting there, just like all the messages I've gotten, hundreds of messages about people crying at the end of that trailer. They will at the end of this film, but then it goes into something that's pretty funny. And it's kind of like the Farrelly brothers. So you'll see, but trust me, it'll be it's worth the price of admission to see these little outtakes that are coming.
Yeah.
And they're pretty spectacular.
Yeah. So at this point, you're still discussing distribution, etc.
Well, there was one company that wanted me to sign something. Well, there was two, actually. There was one a while ago, like 6 months ago. They were trying to get me to sign a deal right then. But they know that I'm a first-time filmmaker. And at that point, when the other one, there was no strike going on. Now there was another company, but they started making some fee changes and stuff. And I had such a bad experience with that record back in '96 when it got taken from me, that I'm very guarded, and I want the best for this. Not only because it's me, but it's Bobby's end of life. If this is the last picture, if you will, that people are going to see of him, and I want it to be remembered in the most respectful way. So I want to, believe me, there's been like 2 major offers right now, and there's another one that wants me to finish editing, and they're very high caliber. So I want that high caliber. I want to make sure, you know how it goes in the record business these days. That last record we did, right away they're like, okay, here's the advance, here's this, we're going to send it to our publisher. Well, that publisher is a cookie cutter. He has like 5 news organizations, same paragraph. Then they put it up on a streaming service, and it's up to you to promote it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And then they hope that your fans, you know, bring it in. There's not a lot of marketing anymore, even for the biggest artists, except for if you're Bruno Mars or Taylor Swift or Adele or something, do they spend millions of dollars? It's just not there anymore. And I know you know that.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that it gets the recognition it deserves.
Yeah.
So,
well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. All the best for the film, and maybe we'll have a special screening in Australia one day.
Oh, that'd be beautiful. Well, there'll definitely be one in Los Angeles because all the guys have been talking about it. They can't wait to get together that night. So it'll be a special thing. And then we'll bring Bobby in the end to get one last hug from everybody and go from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck with everything, and great to chat.
Thank you, Greg. Take care.